Okay everyone, so welcome to this first video lecture of the course. I will be talking here about how to read and speed read scientific articles. So the aim of this lecture is for me to discuss and for you hopefully to get an idea about how to quickly read and evaluate research articles or primary literature. And the reason why I've included this lecture is that because during this course you will read quite a lot of literature. There's no course book, but most of the reading will consist of scientific research articles. And when reading then, because there will be quite a lot of literature, it's important to learn how to read important things and therefore being able to speed up your reading. So first of all, it's important to think a little bit about what are research articles. Well, they are a communication tool that are used in different ways. First of all, to share new knowledge. This could be results from an experiment, for example, or a field survey, or a review of the literature. It's also a tool to explain new methods. These could be entirely new methods that someone has thought up, or an improvement of an existing method. It's also a tool to share new ideas without actually presenting new data. An idea about how something in the world works, or how we, in theory, could, for example, improve management of a natural resource. It's also a tool to question existing hypotheses, ideas, or methods. For example, if I read a new scientific article and I feel that the authors have really missed the point here, or that they have used a bad analysis method, then I could write a comment to that as an article, to that research article, or explain my critique. It's also a way to separate good from bad science. Most research articles are published in journals that use peer review, meaning that manuscripts that are submitted or sent into that journal are critically reviewed by several experts in that field. And these experts then suggest whether this new research article is good enough to be published, or if it needs to be revised in some way. For example, could be small textual changes or big changes like reanalyzing the data, or even collecting new data. So why do we then read articles? Well, first of all, of course, to learn new facts about, particularly if it's a field that we don't know that much about. Could also be to learn new methods. For example, if we're going to design an experiment or a survey, it may be good to see how does this method actually work, or how have other people used this method. It could also be used to identify novel research questions, for example, by collecting all scientific research articles that have been written in a particular subject area, reading those, and then identifying where is the scientific frontier, where is the limit to our knowledge in this particular field at this moment, and therefore being able to identify what could be new and novel questions. We also read scientific articles, particularly on this course. You will be reading articles in order to write your essays, which will be done as a review of literature. And you will then read articles to find and cite scientific sources that either support or refute claims that you want to make in your essays. And when thinking about reading scientific articles, one of the first things that is good to know is the general structure of a research article. And most papers, or the traditional research papers, they consist of 5 different parts: an introduction, a method section, a results section, a discussion section, and a reference section. And most research articles typically have this hourglass shape, where they start very broadly introduction by reviewing the broader scientific research field, explaining why is this field interesting or important. And then introduction gradually narrows down through different paragraphs, ending in a very specific way, usually by explaining what's the particular aim of this study. After that comes the methods, where the author explains exactly what was done, how was it done, using what tools, where in the world, for example, when, during what period, during what year, and so forth, and what sort of data was collected, and how was this data analyzed. For example, what statistical analysis were used to analyze the data. Then comes the results section, where the results from these analyses are presented. And after the explanation of the results comes the discussion part, where the results are discussed. They are, for example, presented in more detail and compared to results from previous studies in the same field. For example, identifying whether these results are in line with what has been found before, or if they question what has been found before. And then the discussion typically broadens and ends with explaining why are these findings important for the broader research field. And then at the end of the paper usually comes the reference section, where the research articles that are cited in the paper are listed, usually in alphabetical or even chronological order. Then we have the short papers, or sometimes called letters or short communications. And these have largely the same components as a traditional paper. And the big difference is usually that they are shorter and that the method section is usually placed at the end of the article. And also it's typically that sometimes that the results and discussion section are actually mixed. And the main reason why these types of papers are written is that they are shorter and therefore quicker to read. So they're more accessible. It's quicker and faster to understand what it is that the researchers or authors are the message that they want to convey. And third and finally, we have review papers. So basically reviews of other scientific literature. And these typically have also largely the same structure as a traditional paper, with the big difference that the results are usually replaced by an analysis section where different types of literature are analyzed. For example, research articles that have focused on different types of questions. And then these are discussed in a more general way. And therefore, a review paper can typically have several hourglass shapes, particularly within this analysis section, going from general to specific, and then from specific to general, back and forth. Another important thing to think about when you get a new research paper in front of you, and that you can use to guide your reading, is to identify what's the story that the authors are trying to convey. All writing is about telling stories, and also scientific writing. So here I will show you 8 questions that you can use when reading scientific articles in order to help you understand what is the story that these authors are trying to convey. The first question is, what's the central question? Most research articles, they focus on one or sometimes several central questions. These are the things that the authors want to test. And then, why is this question important? This relates to the broader research field. How do the authors argue that this is, why is this an important question that should be answered? Third, what data were used to answer this question? Was it data from an experiment, or from a field survey, or from a literature review, for example? What methods were used to get the data? Was it an experiment? Was it a field survey? Was it a short or a long experiment? And so forth. And what analysis were applied for the data to answer the question? For example, were there statistical analysis done? How were those statistical analysis done? What results were actually obtained? This is a really, really important question. And based on those results, what's the answer to the central question? And then finally, what does this answer tell us about the broader field? Does this new answer to the central question, does it change the broader field in some way? So these 8 questions you can use in the future when you're reading, and try to use these questions to guide your reading, searching for the answers to these questions when reading a research article. And depending on your goal, you can read scientific articles in different ways, and these different ways take different amounts of time. First of all, if you just want to identify whether something could be a potential reference that you may want to cite in the future, you would typically start by reading just the title. And that typically takes seconds, up to 10 seconds maybe. And just reading the title will often tell you a lot about, is this something that you think is valuable enough to continue reading? If you think that it's worth to continue reading it, you will typically read the abstract as well. So the first part, which usually consists of something like 250 or 300 words. This is basically a short summary of the entire paper, and it would take you minutes to read. And after reading the abstract, you will usually be able to know, is this something that I need to continue reading, or is this something that I should skip from now? It's not central for my essay, for example. If you think that it is something that is important to continue with, that you should review it as a potential reference in more detail. For example, is this a paper that I should cite in my essay? Then I would typically read the method section and parts of the introduction and the discussion. This is because these sections contain a lot of important information that helps you decide whether this is something you can cite or not cite. And this is, focusing on these parts is usually resulting in speed reading. If this is an article that you're reading because you're interested in a new field that you don't know that much about, you would typically read the whole paper from start to finish. And that can take anything from half an hour for a short paper to several hours for really, really long review articles, for example. And if this is an article that you should review in very close detail, the reading could really take several hours. And when setting out to read an article, there are different things that you should think about, and particularly the preparations. And the preparations are central to reading. And first of all, what's the really important preparation for reading an article is actually to have read a lot of articles before. Because the more articles you have read, the quicker you will be able to read, understand, and critically evaluate new articles. Because when reading articles, you gradually learn the structure of them that I've been talking about now. Where do you find the important parts? It helps you practice your speed reading, what parts to read. It helps you learn the scientific field, for example, different facts. It helps you identify quickly what is good versus bad science, for example, methods. It helps you also identify what journals the research is typically published in. And reading a lot of articles also helps you getting to know different authors and research groups that are working on fields that for example, that you are particularly interested in. Secondly, it's important to carefully select actually what to read, which scientific articles to read. And this will save you the most time, I would say. And the first thing you should do here is that when you're searching for new articles to read, you should search online scientific databases that contain and list scientific articles. And you then narrow down the selection of what potential articles to read using combinations of keywords or search phrases. And I will talk in another movie about using online databases. And once you have identified papers that you want to read, you read them. Another approach that you can use is to search review papers on the particular field that you're interested in for potentially relevant articles that are cited in that review. And if you still can't find any information, you could, for example, ask someone more knowledgeable in the field for suggestions on what to read, for example, your supervisor. Thirdly, before you start reading, you should think about how to facilitate the actual reading process. And one of the ways is to obtain the article in the form that is most easy for you personally to read. For example, some people prefer to read printed articles. and have a pen and, on paper, and have a pencil where you can, for example, underline things or encircle things or write questions in the margin and so forth. Where some people prefer to read PDF files on a computer or a tablet. And then it's important, of course, to have a good PDF reader. You should also think about finding a good physical reading place or space that doesn't involve too many distractions. And this could, for example, be a library or your couch or sofa at your home, or the subway going back and from the university, or your summer house. This is very individual. Some people read best when they sit at the subway on their way to work or their way to studies and so forth. You should also think about when you're most good at reading. Is it early in the morning or late in the afternoon or late in the evening? Some people are really tired in the evening and so forth. So all of these things are very individual, but it's really important to try to identify where and when do you read best. So to then finish off, how could you then speed read scientific articles? Not having to read the whole thing through, but be able to read more quickly to decide to extract important pieces of information. For example, the answers to the 8 questions that I listed earlier about the story, or to decide is this something that I should cite or not. So first of all, find a good reading place, have the article ready, either printed or as a PDF, and then start by reading the title and the abstract. And then you can use some guiding questions when you're reading that. What was actually done? And why was this done? And what was found? And what tools were used to find that new knowledge? And you can, for example, underscore nouns and verbs in the abstract to help you do this, to answer these questions. After that, when you've read the title and the abstract, you should decide, should I stop reading here because this is probably not an article that is relevant for me, or should I continue, or should I file it for later because I don't have time right now to read it, but this is something that I probably should read in the future. After that comes a phase that I would call broad reading. And then you will start by identifying the article structure. For example, what parts does it consist of? How many pages does it have? Is there a lot of figures and tables and so forth? Then I would quickly have a look at possible figures and tables. Figures and tables should be quite informative and give you a fairly good view of what's actually found in the paper, especially after reading the abstract. After that, I would read the starting paragraph of the introduction and the end paragraph, because those usually are some of the most important ones in terms of showing what is the broad research field that this article is framed within, and what did the authors actually set out to do. I would also read the start and the end of the discussion, plus a potential conclusion part, because these often contain the most information about, okay, for example, what was actually found and how is this important for the broader research field. And the guiding questions you can use here, for example, what was the actual aim? What was actually done by the authors? What did they actually find? And what tools did they use? And also here can help to underscore nouns and verbs, for example. And then you decide if you, again, should I stop reading, continue, or should I file this for later? After that comes the sort of more deep reading part. Already here you would probably have decided whether this is something that you think is worthy citing in your essay, for example, or not. But if you decide to keep reading because you want to really get a good view of the whole research paper, then I would read the methods and the results section in detail. And then you really need to have enough time to go into that in detail to understand what was done and what was found. And some guiding questions here, for example, is okay, the authors in the previous parts that you read, they claim to have found different things. After reading the methods and results section, do you believe that what they found, that they claim to have found, was true? Is it citable, therefore? So the tools you would use is to critically review what methods were used, how were those results analyzed, and so forth, and actually to compare that with what claims were made in the title, abstract, discussion, and conclusion part. So I hope this scheme here that I present can help you starting to learn what parts to read of research papers, and therefore how to be able to more quickly read scientific articles and be able to extract important information and also decide in the future whether you want to cite them or not. And with that, I wish you happy reading. Thank you for listening.